There are internet stars, and then there are internet phenomena. People who don't just become famous, but completely hijack the attention of the world, and somehow, out of nowhere, a loud teenager from Ohio became one of them. Not an actor, not a musician, not an athlete, streamer, a kid with a webcam, a PlayStation, internet access, and an energy the world had never really seen before. 1 minute, almost nobody knew his name. The next, millions of people across the planet were screaming it. Speed, IShowSpeed. To some people, he's hilarious. To others, he's chaotic. To critics, he represents everything wrong with internet culture. But beneath the barking, the screaming, the viral clips, and the madness is a deeper story. A story about attention, about loneliness, about entertainment, about the internet, and about what happens when the entire world watches someone grow up in real time. Because the truth is, IShowSpeed didn't just become famous, he became a symbol of a completely new era of celebrity. And maybe the craziest part of all is that almost nobody saw it coming. Welcome to High Figure Podcast. Before the millions of followers, before football stadiums chanted his name, before the chaos, there was Darren Watkins Jr., born in Cincinnati, Ohio, just another kid growing up during the golden era of internet culture. And that timing matters, because Darren grew up in a generation where becoming famous no longer required Hollywood. You didn't need a record label, a movie studio, or television. You just needed attention. And the internet had created an entirely new pathway to it. By the late 2000s and 10s, kids everywhere were watching. YouTubers, streamers, gamers, creators, reaction channels. The internet had become the new entertainment industry, and Darren was watching all of it, quietly learning, quietly absorbing, like millions of other teenagers. He started streaming. At first, almost nobody cared. A few viewers, small chats, no major audience, no fame, no viral moments. And this is important, because most people only know Speed after the explosion. They don't know the version before it, the version streaming for almost nobody, the version trying to figure himself out in real time. And here's the thing about internet fame most people don't understand. Before the world sees confidence, there's usually invisibility. For a long time, Darren was invisible. And invisibility changes people, especially online. Because on the internet, silence feels brutal. No views, no reactions, no attention, nothing. And somewhere during that period, Darren began realizing something. Being normal would never make him impossible to ignore, but emotion would, intensity would, energy would, chaos would, and whether consciously or unconsciously, that realization changed everything. At first glance, Speed looked random. A teenager screaming at video games, breaking things, jumping around, acting insane. People laughed at him, mocked him, turned him into memes. But what most people missed was that the internet itself was changing at the exact same time. Attention spans were collapsing, TikTok was exploding, short-form content was taking over, and suddenly, the loudest, most unpredictable, most emotionally explosive moments became the most valuable thing online. Not polished content, not perfection, reaction. And Speed generated reaction better than almost anyone. You never knew what he was about to do. That unpredictability became addictive. Because the internet loves uncertainty, people kept watching because they felt something could happen at any second. And in entertainment, that feeling is gold. Speed understood something many creators never fully grasp. People don't always remember what you say. They remember how you make them feel. And Speed made people feel shocked, entertained, confused, overwhelmed, excited, sometimes all within 30 seconds. The clips spread everywhere. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Twitter, Instagram, Discord servers, group chats, memes, everywhere. And the internet began doing what it does best, turning moments into mythology. Because once the algorithm realizes people react strongly to you, it starts feeding you to the world endlessly. And that's when Darren Watkins Jr. stopped being just another streamer and started becoming IShowSpeed. One of the biggest reasons Speed fascinated people is because nobody could fully tell where the character ended and where Darren began. Was he acting? Was he serious? Was he performing? Or was this genuinely who he was? And honestly, the answer was probably both. That's what made him compelling, because Speed felt emotionally real, even during the chaos. Most internet personalities are carefully controlled, filtered, polished, safe. But Speed felt raw, unpredictable, like somebody live streaming directly from emotion instead of strategy. And younger audiences connected deeply with that, especially Gen Z, because this generation grew up online. They can detect fake personalities instantly. And whether people loved Speed or hated him, most people agreed on one thing. He didn't feel manufactured. He felt human, messy, immature, emotional, sometimes reckless, sometimes hilarious, sometimes uncomfortable, but real. And in a digital world filled with perfection, realness becomes magnetic. That's part of why audiences became obsessed with him. Not because he was calm, but because he was emotionally explosive in a way most people are too afraid to be publicly. Speed represented emotional freedom, and the internet rewarded him for it. Massively. Then came Cristiano Ronaldo, and suddenly, Speed stopped being just a gaming streamer. Now, he had identity, purpose, a symbol. His obsession with Ronaldo became legendary. The screams, the celebrations, the passion, the sue. But beneath the memes, something deeper was happening. People could feel that his admiration was genuine. Not calculated, not fake, real. And authenticity creates emotional connection. Football fans around the world started discovering him. Not because they cared about streaming, but because they understood passion. And Speed had passion overflowing out of him constantly. That changed everything. Now his audience wasn't just gamers. It became football fans, teenagers, meme culture, international audiences, casual internet users. He crossed over. And once an internet personality crosses beyond their original niche, their growth becomes explosive. Suddenly, Speed was global. Fans chased him in public. Crowds screamed his name. Entire cities reacted to his presence. And this is where the story becomes surreal. Because remember, just a few years earlier, this was a kid streaming to tiny audiences in his room. Now, he couldn't walk through public spaces normally anymore. That kind of transformation can psychologically change anyone, especially somebody still growing up. There's something dangerous about becoming famous online too young, especially when your fame depends on intensity, because eventually, the internet stops rewarding normal behavior. It starts demanding escalation, bigger reactions, bigger moments, more chaos, more unpredictability, and this is the hidden trap of virality. Once millions of people associate you with excitement, silence becomes terrifying. You feel pressure to constantly perform, to constantly entertain, to constantly become more, and for Speed, that pressure became enormous. Because now the world expected madness from him. Every stream, every appearance, every interaction. He became trapped inside the expectations of his own internet identity. And when you grow up online, mistakes don't disappear quietly. They become headlines, clips, controversies, global discussions, and Speed experienced all of it. Backlash, criticism, bans, public scrutiny. Moments that people used to define him forever. But maybe that's the uncomfortable truth about internet fame. The same internet that builds people up also feeds off watching them struggle, especially young creators. Because audiences often forget something important. Behind the memes, behind the clips, behind the screaming character, is still a real human being. A teenager becoming an adult in front of millions, and psychologically, that's not normal. No human in history was designed for that level of constant visibility, yet modern internet culture makes it feel ordinary. So why does Speed continue growing? Why do millions of people still care? Because beneath the chaos, Speed represents something emotionally important to this generation. Freedom, emotion, unfiltered humanity. Modern life feels increasingly artificial. Filtered photos, scripted influencers, carefully managed personalities, everything polished, everything controlled. And then comes Speed, completely unpredictable, emotionally loud, messy, uncontrolled, human. He feels like the internet without a mask. And people connect to that deeply, especially younger audiences who are tired of perfection. That's why even people who criticize him still watch him, because he creates feeling. And the internet runs on feeling, not logic, not structure, emotion. And Speed might be one of the purest emotional entertainers the internet has ever produced. Not because he's perfect, but because he's emotionally impossible to ignore. IShowSpeed is bigger than streaming now, bigger than YouTube, bigger than internet clips. He represents a new type of celebrity entirely, a celebrity built in real time, through live streams, through algorithms, through memes, through emotional connection. Traditional celebrities used to feel distant, untouchable. But internet celebrities feel accessible, like friends, like people audiences grew up with. And Speed mastered that era better than almost anyone. People didn't just watch Speed, they experienced him, live, unfiltered, every emotion happening in real time. That changes the relationship between creator and audience completely. And maybe that's why his rise feels so different. He wasn't manufactured by Hollywood. The internet created him itself, collectively. Millions of people sharing clips, reacting, laughing, posting, commenting, until eventually, the world had no choice but to notice him. At first, people thought Speed was just another loud kid online, just another viral moment, just another meme. But years later, he's still here, still growing, still evolving, still dominating attention. And maybe that says something bigger about the world we live in now. Because Speed didn't become famous by fitting into traditional entertainment. He became famous by understanding something deeper. On the modern internet, attention is the most powerful currency on earth, and nobody captures attention quite like him. Not because he's perfect, not because he's polished, but because he feels alive, raw, explosive, human. And whether people love him, criticize him, laugh at him, or admire him, one thing has become undeniable. A teenager from Ohio didn't just become famous, he became one of the defining internet figures of an entire generation. And somewhere beneath all the screaming, all the chaos, all the madness, is Darren Watkins Jr., a kid who turned a webcam into global influence and changed internet culture forever.